The starting point, the source of suffering, lies within each of us. When we understand our own reality, we shall recognize the solution to the problem of suffering. Know thyself. All wise persons have advised we must begin by knowing our own nature, otherwise, we can never solve our own problems or the problems of the world. But actually, what do we know about ourselves? We are each convinced of the importance of ourselves, of the uniqueness of ourselves. But our knowledge of ourselves is only superficial. At deeper levels, we do not know ourselves at all. The Buddha examined the phenomenon of a human being by observing his own nature. Laying aside all preconceptions, he explored reality within and realized that every being is a composite of five processes, four of them mental and one physical. Matter. Let us begin with the physical aspect. This is the most obvious, the most apparent portion of ourselves, readily perceived by all the senses, and yet how little we really know about it. Superficially, one can control the body, it moves and acts according to the conscious will. But on another level, all the internal organs function beyond our control. Without our knowledge, at a subcellular level, we know nothing. Experimentally, experientially of the incessant biochemical reactions occurring within each cell of the body. But this is still not the ultimate reality of the material phenomenon. Ultimately, the seemingly solid body is composed of subatomic particles and empty space. What is more, even these subatomic particles have no real solidity. The existence span of one of them is much less than a trillionth of a second. Particles continuously arise and vanish, passing into and out of existence like a flow of vibrations. This is the ultimate reality of the body, of all matter, discovered by the Buddha 2500 years ago. Through their own investigations, modern scientists have recognized and accepted this ultimate reality of the material universe. However, these scientists have not become liberated, enlightened persons. Out of the curiosity, they have investigated the nature of the universe using their intellects and relying on instruments to verify their theories. In contrast, the Buddha was motivated not simply by curiosity but rather by the wish to find a way out of suffering. He used no instrument in his investigation other than his own mind. The truth that he discovered was the result not the intellectualizing but of his own direct experience, and that is why it could liberate him. He found that the entire material universe was composed of particles called in Pali kalapas or individual units. These units exhibit in endless variation the basic qualities of matter, mass, cohesion, temperature, and movement. They combine to form structures which seem to have some permanence, but actually these are all composed of minuscule kalapas which are in a state of continuously arising and passing away. This is the ultimate reality of matter, a constant stream of waves or particles. This is the body which we each called myself, mind. Along with the physical process, there is the psychic process, the mind. Although it cannot be touched or seen, it seems even more intimately connected with ourselves than our bodies. We may picture a future existence without the body, but we cannot imagine any such existence without the mind. Yet, how little we know about the mind and how little we are able to control it. How often it refuses to do what we want and does what we do not want. Our control of the conscious mind is tenuous enough, but the unconscious seems totally beyond our power or understanding, filled with forces of which we may not approve or be aware. As he examined the body, the Buddha also examined the mind and found that, in broad, overall terms, it consisted of four processes: consciousness, Vijnana, perception, Sanna, sensation, Vedana, and reaction, Sankhara. The first process, consciousness, is the receiving part of the mind, the act of undifferentiated awareness or cognition. It simply registers the occurrence of any phenomenon, the reception of any input, physical or mental. It notes the raw data of experience without assigning labels or making value judgments. The second mental process is perception, the act of recognition. This part of the mind identifies whatever has been noted by the consciousness. It distinguishes, labels, and categorizes the incoming raw data and makes evaluations, positive or negative. The next part of the mind is sensation. Actually, as soon as any input is received, the sensation arises, a signal that something is happening. So long as the input is not evaluated, the sensation remains neutral. But once a value is attached to the incoming data, the sensation becomes pleasant or unpleasant, depending on the evaluation given. If the sensation is pleasant, a wish forms to prolong and intensify the experience. If it is an unpleasant sensation, the wish is to stop it, to push it away. The mind reacts with liking or disliking. For example, when the ear is functioning normally and one hears a sound, cognition is at work. When the sound is recognized as word with positive or negative connotations, perception has started to function. Next sensation comes into play. If the words are praised, a pleasant sensation arises. If they are abused, an unpleasant sensation arises. At once, reaction takes place. If the sensation is pleasant, one starts liking it, wanting more words of praise. If the sensation is unpleasant, one starts disliking it, wanting to stop the abuse. The same steps occur whenever any of the other senses receives an input: consciousness, perception, sensation, reaction. These four mental functions are even more fleeting than the ephemeral particles composing the material reality. Each moment that the senses comes into contact with any object, the four mental processes occur with lightning like rapidity and repeat themselves with each subsequent moment of contact. So rapidly does this occur, however, that one is unaware of what is happening. It is only when a particular reaction has been repeated over a longer period of time and has taken a pronounced, intensified form that awareness of it develops at the conscious level. The most striking aspect of this description of a human being is not to it includes but what it omits. Whether we are Western or Eastern, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, or anything else, each of us has a congenital congenital each of us has a congenital assurance that there is an I somewhere within us, a continuing identity. We operate on the unthinking assumption that the person who existed 10 years ago is essentially the same person who exists today, who will exist 10 years from now, perhaps who will still exist in a future life after death. No matter what philosophies or theories or beliefs we hold as true, actually, we live our lives with the deep rooted convictions: I was, I am, I shall be. The Buddha challenged the instinctive assertion of identity. By doing so, he was not expounding one more speculative view to combat the theories of others. He repeatedly emphasized that he was not putting forth an opinion, but simply describing the truth that he had experienced and that any ordinary person can experience. The enlightened one has cast aside all theories, he said, for he has seen the reality of matter, sensation, perception, reaction, and consciousness, and their arising and passing away. Despite appearance, he had found that each human being is in fact a series of separate but related events. Each event is the result of the preceding one and follows it without any interval. The unbroken progression of closely connected events gives the appearance of continuity, of identity, but this is only an apparent reality, not ultimate truth. We may give a river a name, but actually it is a flow of water, never pausing in its course. We may think of the light of a candle as something constant, but if we look closely, we see that it is really a flame arising from a wick which burns for a moment to be replaced at once by a new flame, moment after moment. We talk of the light of an electric lamp, never pausing to think that in reality it is like the river, a constant flow, in this case, a flow of energy caused by very high frequency oscillations taking place within the filament. Every moment, something new arises as a product of the past, to be replaced by something new in the following moment. The succession of the event is so rapid and continuous that it is difficult to discern. At a particular point in the process, one cannot say that what occurs now is the same as what preceded it, nor can one say that it is not the same. Nevertheless, the process occurs. In the same way, the Buddha realized a person is not a finished, unchanging entity, but a process flowing from moment to moment. There is no real being, merely an ongoing flow, a continuous process of becoming. Of, of course, in daily life, we must deal with each other as persons of more or less defined, unchanging nature. We must accept external, apparent reality, or else we could not function at all. External reality is a reality, but only a superficial one. At a deeper level, the reality is that the entire universe, animate and inanimate, is in a constant state of becoming, of arising and passing away. Each of us is in fact a stream of constantly changing subatomic particles, along with which the process of consciousness, perception, sensation, reaction change even more rapidly than the physical process. This is the ultimate reality of the self with which each of us is so concerned. This is the course of events in which we are involved. We can understand it properly by direct experience. We shall find the clue to lead us out of suffering. Questions and answers. Question: when you say mind, I am not sure what you mean. I can't find the mind. SN Goenka: it is everywhere, with every atom. Wherever you feel anything, the mind is there. The mind feels. Question: then by the mind, you don't mean the brain. SN Goenka: oh no, no, no. Here in the West, you think that the mind is only in the head. It is a wrong notion. Question: mind is the whole body. SN Goenka: yes, the whole body contains the mind. The whole body. Question: you speak of the experience of I only in negative terms. Hasn't it a positive side? Isn't there an experience of I which fills a person with joy, peace, and rapture? SN Goenka: by meditation, you will find that all such sensual pleasures are impermanent. They come and pass away. If this I really enjoys them, if they are my pleasures, then I must have some mastery over them. But they just arise and pass away without my control. What I is there? Question: I am speaking not of sensual pleasure, but of a very deep level. At that level, I is of no importance at all. When you reach that level, the ego is dissolved. There is only joy. The question of I does not arise then. Well, instead of I, let us say the experience of a person. Feeling feels. There is no one to feel it. Things are just happenings. That all. Now it seems to you that there must be an I who feels. But if you practice, you will reach the stage where ego dissolves. Then your questions will disappear. I came here because I felt I needed to come here. Yes, quite true. For conventional purposes, we cannot run away from I or mine, but clinging to them, taking them as real in an ultimate sense, will bring only suffering. Question: I was wondering whether there are people who cause suffering for us. Answer: nobody cause suffering for you. You cause the suffering for yourself by generating tensions in the mind. If you know how not to do that, it becomes easy to remain peaceful and happy in every situation. Question: what about when someone else is doing wrong to us? SN Goenka: you must not allow people to do wrong to you. Whenever someone does something wrong, he harms others and at the same time he harms himself. If you allow him to do wrong, you are encouraging him to do wrong. You must use all your strength to stop him, but with only goodwill, compassion, and sympathy for that person. If you act with hatred or anger, then you aggravate the situation. But you cannot have goodwill for such a person unless your mind is calm and peaceful. So practice to develop peace within yourself and then you can solve the problem. Question: what is the point of seeking peace within when there is no peace in the world? SN Goenka: the world will be peaceful only when the people of the world are peaceful and happy. The change has to begin with each individual. If the jungle is withered and you want to restore it to life, you must water each tree of that jungle. If you want world peace, you ought to learn how to be peaceful yourself. Only then you can bring peace to the world. Question: I can understand how meditation will help maladjusted unhappy people. But how about someone who feels satisfied with his life, who is already happy, as an Goenka? Someone who remains satisfied with the superficial pleasures of life is ignorant of the agitation deep within the mind. He is under the illusion that he is a happy person, but his pleasures are not lasting, and the tensions generated in the unconscious keep increasing to appear sooner or later at the conscious level of the mind. When they do, this is so-called happy person become miserable. So why not start working here and now to avoid that situation? Question: is your teaching Mahayana or Hinayana? SN Goenka: neither. The word yana actually means a vehicle that will carry you to find the final goal, but today it is mistakenly given a sectarian connotation. The Buddha never taught anything sectarian. He taught Dhamma, which is universal. This universality is what attracted me to the teaching of the Buddha, which gave me benefit, and therefore this universal Dhamma is what I offer to one and all with all my love and compassion. For me, Dhamma is neither Mahayana or Hinayana nor any sect. Story: the Buddha and the Scientist. The physical reality is changing constantly every moment. This is what the Buddha realized by examining himself. With his strongly concentrated mind, he penetrated deeply into his own nature and found that the entire material structure is composed of minute subatomic particles which are continuously arising and vanishing. In the snapping of a finger or the blinking of an eye, he said, each one of these particles arises and passes away many trillions of times. Unbelievable. Anyone will think who observes only the apparent reality of the body, which seems so solid, so permanent. I used to suppose that the phrase many trillions of times might be an idiomatic expression not to be taken literally. However, modern science has confirmed this statement. Several years ago, an American scientist received the Nobel Prize in Physics. For a long time, he had studied and conducted experiments to learn about the subatomic particles of which the physical universe is composed. It was already known that these particles arise and pass away with the great rapidity over and over again. Now the scientists decided to develop an instrument that would be able to count how many times a particle arises and passes away in 1 second. He very rightly called the instrument that he invented a bubble chamber, and he found that in 1 second a subatomic particle arises and vanishes 10 to the power 22 times. The truth that these scientists discovered is the same as that which the Buddha found, but what a great difference between them. Some of my American students who had taken courses in India later returned to their country and they visited this scientist. They reported to me that despite the fact that he has discovered this reality, he is still an ordinary person with the usual stock of misery that all ordinary person have. He is not totally liberated from suffering. Not that scientist has not become an enlightened person, not been freed from all suffering, because he has not experienced truth directly. What he has learned is still only intellectual wisdom. He believes this truth becomes he has faith in the instrument which he has invented, but he has not experienced the truth himself. I am nothing against this man or against modern science. However, one must note be a scientist only of the world outside, like the Buddha. One should also a scientist of world within in order to experience truth directly. Personal realization of truth will automatically change the habit pattern of the mind so that one starts to live accordingly to the truth. Every action becomes directed towards one's own good and good effort of others. If this inner experience is missing, science is liable to be misused for destructive ends. But if we become scientists of the reality within, we shall make proper use of science for the happiness of all.